Last week we started our series on God is ... Nick began by talking about God is infinite, and this week I'm going to be talking about God is unchanging. When I was single, and I was actually single for 32 years before Emma and I got married, one of my fears about marriage was what happens if the person that I marry changes from the person that she started off being, and how will I cope with that, and how can I be sure? And it had quite an impact on me. And I think probably one of the things I most appreciated about my parents was the fact that I felt utterly secure that their love for me was not going to change, that it was going to remain almost whatever I did and wherever I went. I think it's also one of the things that I most appreciate about knowing Jesus. Whatever my ups and downs are, that knowing that he will remain the same gives me an incredible security. The writer to the Hebrews says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it's interesting because my parents often say that when I was really quite small, I was very shy and quite timid. At the age of about 11 or 12, that began to change, and there seemed to be a greater confidence that came. And some people wondered if it was because I started doing well in sports, and that gave me a greater confidence. And I'm sure that had an impact. But do you know what? I think the thing that had the biggest impact, that it was when I was just 11 years and 2 months, that I remember clearly inviting Jesus to come into my life. And that sense, that knowing that he was with me, and that whatever else was going on around me, or however my friends were reacting to me, that he was with me and that he loved me, I think gave me a confidence to face life in a whole new way. And the truth is that we live in a world that's full of change. It's a world that's hardly recognisable from the one that I even just graduated in, a bit shocking to say, but 31 years ago. And if I think about what that world was like for me, well, all sorts of things were different, but two very simple things. At the start of my working life, 31 years ago, I didn't have a computer and I didn't have a mobile phone. Can you imagine life without those things now? So much has changed. This year illustrates very clearly the instability of so many things in this world. So many things we couldn't have imagined have changed like they have from 12 months before. And for all of us, our relationships won't just remain the same. They will change. Our health won't remain the same. It will change. Our work changes. Our financial situation changes. Those things we can't be sure will remain the same. And therefore, in a world of change, we need to find something or someone who doesn't change to build our lives upon. The truth is that even as a follower of Jesus, your circumstances may change for good or for bad. Putting your trust in God does not mean that your circumstances will always remain the same or just get better. They may get worse. And you'll probably be a bit disappointed if you think that somehow by trusting in him, your circumstances will always be good. You can't be sure of that. But knowing his everlasting love, knowing his eternal presence, and knowing his unchanging faithfulness enables you to face every situation and circumstances that comes your way, good or bad. The psalmist in Psalm 102 has a real sense of being overwhelmed by his afflictions and difficult circumstances. And yet in the midst of that, he makes this statement. He says, in the beginning, talking of the Lord, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. What a fantastic declaration of what God has done and who he is. And he goes on to say this, they will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like clothing, you will change them and they will be discarded. But you remain the same, and your years will never end. But you remain the same, and your years will never end. What a great declaration of hope and trust in the midst of difficult circumstances. That God remains the same, and his years never end. In Numbers 23, we see Balaam, who had been asked by Balak to curse the people of Israel, and Balaam can't do that. And what does he say? He makes this statement: God is not human, that he should lie, not a human being, that he should change his mind. God doesn't change his mind. He remains the same. And who he is never changes. His attributes are the same from the beginning of time right into eternity. His character never changes. He never gets better or worse. He doesn't get moody. He remains the same. His plans don't change, and his promises don't change. And therefore, there is no security and no insurance policy that you can find in anyone or anything else that compares in any way to putting your trust in the unchanging nature of God, of who he is and what he has promised. Jesus actually warned in the Sermon on the Mount about the danger of putting our hope in wrong things. He said in Matthew 6:19-20, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." Today, whoever you are and whenever you're watching this, I want to encourage you to consider where you're looking for your security and where you're putting your hope. Is it in people and things that will shift? Is it in people and things that will change and come to an end? Or is it in an everlasting, unchanging love of God? I encourage you to put your hope in him. When Nick started this series last week, he talked about his hope that as we went through this series, we might get a greater glimpse of who God is, that we might get caught up in his splendour, that our eyes would be lifted to him. And my prayer would be for every one of us that that would be the case. When he said it, it reminded me of an old song that we used to sing, which goes like this. I'm not going to sing it, but the words are, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." And my prayer is that every one of us would be caught up with the unchanging nature of who God is, and we'd be caught up with Jesus, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever.